Hi, and welcome to this video about relative clauses in English. First, we need to understand what is the difference between a clause and a sentence. A clause, it says here, it's a complete idea containing a subject and a verb. The most important part here is that it's an idea. A sentence, on the other hand, it's a grammatical unit containing one or more clauses, starts with a capital letter and ends with a period. So basically, a sentence is like a container for clauses. It can have only one clause, and that is the usual sentence, or it can contain two or more clauses. That means it can have different ideas on the same sentence and therefore more than one subject or more than one verb. For example, here we have two one-clause sentences. They start with a capital letter and they end with a period. Harvey Dent became Two-Face, period. That's one sentence because it starts capital and ends with a period, and it's one clause because we have one subject, Harvey Dent, and we have one verb, became. So we only have one idea in one sentence. And we also have only one idea, the explosion that burned half of his face. We have a subject, explosion, and we have a verb, burned, and it's only one idea. So these two are one clause sentences, the usual sentences that we're accustomed to. Now, we can put these two clauses into one sentence, but we need to use what we call conjunctions. We cannot just put the two of them together because the ideas are not going to have coherence, are not going to make sense. So we use conjunctions. In this case, we use the conjunction because. And as you can see, before the conjunction because, we have the first clause. It starts with a capital letter. Harvey Dent became Two-Face. That's one idea. Notice how we don't have a period right there. Instead of the period, we have a conjunction. That means that it's one clause, but it's not the end of the sentence. So the conjunction because puts these two clauses together into one sentence. The second sentence, we can see that it doesn't start in a capital letter. That means it's not the start of the sentence. We are mid-sentence. And it says, an explosion burned half of his face, period. As you can see, we have the period here. So that means the whole sentence starts from Harvey Dent and ends in half of his face. And we have two ideas, we have two subjects, and we have two verbs that are put together using the conjunction because. Okay, now, so to continue, we need to understand what is the difference between subject, verb, and object. A subject is the person, thing, or animal executing the action. Who is doing stuff? Who is doing what we're talking about? Who's executing the action? The verb is the action in itself. What are we talking about? What is the subject doing? What is his action? That is the verb. And the object is the person, thing, or animal receiving the action. For example, a subject, Hellboy. We have the action, loves. So Hellboy is the one that is executing the action. He is the one that loves, not anybody else. Only Hellboy loves in this sentence. And then Liz is the object of the sentence because she is not loving, she is not executing the action, she doesn't love, but she is being loved. She's receiving the love of Hellboy. Hellboy loves. Who does he love? Who receives the action? Well, Liz. So Hellboy loves Liz. We have a subject, we have a verb, and we have an object. This is going to be very important later to understand a little bit more about the clauses and the relative clauses. So let's start there. Relative clauses. It says relative clauses give more information about a noun. So remember, a clause is an idea, a complete idea that has a subject and a verb. And we're going to use this new idea, this clause, to give more information about a noun, a person, a thing, or an object. Let's see some examples. This is a simple one clause sentence. Mavis is married to Johnny. We have a subject, which is Mavis. We have a verb, is, and we have an object. So Mavis is the subject. She is married. That's the verb. And who is receiving the action? Johnny. So Johnny is the object in that case. Now, we're going to use a relative clause to give more information about Mavis before continuing with the sentence. So first we start with the subject, Mavis. We're going to put a comma here to indicate that we're going to start a relative clause, that we are going to indicate that these next words are not going to be the object or the verb of the sentence. We're not going to continue. We're going to put a little pause on the sentence. And here is where we're going to start the relative clause. This is the relative clause. Who is Dracula's daughter? So we have here a subject, who is who, the verb is, and that's it. We have a subject and object, and then we have more information, Dracula's daughter. So that is a clause. We have a subject and an object, and we have a complete idea. And when we finish this relative clause, we're gonna put another comma to say, okay, we're finished. Unpause this. We start with a pause with the first comma, and then we put a play with the other comma. We finished our intermission talking more about the subject, and now we can finish the sentence. Is married to Johnny. Let's see another example. Here again, we have one sentence clause. It says, the Chinese Imperial Army fought the Huns. So in this case, the subject is the Chinese Imperial Army. The verb is fought. And the object, who did they fight? They fought the Huns. The Huns are the object. Now let's see this with relative clauses. Okay, it says the Chinese Imperial Army, and here comes the relative clause. We're going to give more information about the Chinese Imperial Army. And it says, which Mulan infiltrated, that's the relative clause. We give more information. Fought the Huns, and then we end the sentence with a period. Now, to continue learning about relative clauses, we need to understand what are relative pronouns. Remember that pronouns are words that we can use instead of nouns, which they're going to replace a noun. Relative pronouns are used instead of a subject or object of the relative clause. They're going to replace the noun, either the subject or the object. For example, here we have a sentence with two clauses, one of which is a relative clause. Here we have a sentence. Miles Morales, comma, who is a Spider-Man, comma, found Peter Parker. In this case, who is replacing the subject of that clause, which originally was Miles Morales. So we could say Miles Morales, comma, Miles Morales is a Spider-Man, comma, found Peter Parker. So instead of repeating Miles Morales two times, we can use the pronoun who to replace it, and now we don't have Miles Morales two times. Now, the main clause as a one clause sentence is this. Miles Morales found Peter Parker. Miles Morales is a Spider-Man. That is the other clause in a one-clause sentence. So as you can see, both of these have Miles Morales as a subject. And in the second one, we are replacing Miles Morales with who. Okay, now, just a really brief list of relative pronouns. That, which, who, whom, and whose. All of these can be used in the relative clauses to put instead of a subject or an object. Now let's learn a little bit more about the subject or object of the relative clause. Mavis, who is Dracula's daughter, is married to Johnny. So in this sentence 1, Mavis is the subject or object of the relative clause. So we here have the relative clause on itself. Mavis is Dracula's daughter. So who is executing the action? Who is? Is it Dracula or is it Mavis? Who is the subject of that sentence? So yes, the subject is Mavis. So that is why we use the relative pronoun who to put instead of Mavis a second time. Here we have another sentence. The Chinese Imperial Army, which Mulan infiltrated, fought the Huns. Now let's see, in this sentence too, the army is the subject or the object of the relative clause. So here we have just the clause. Mulan infiltrated the army. Who did the action? Mulan did the action. Mulan executed the infiltration. So she is the subject of that sentence. So Mulan infiltrated the army. So in that case, the army is the object of the sentence. Mulan infiltrated what? The army. So that is why we're going to replace the army with a relative pronoun, in this case, which. So the Chinese Imperial Army, which Mulan infiltrated, fought the Huns. If a pronoun is the object of a relative clause, we omit the pronoun. We don't need the pronoun if a noun is the object of a relative clause, the noun that we're trying to replace. For example, here we have a relative clause, normal relative clause, and it says, Cusco was a llama who Pacha saved. Here we have the relative pronoun who. So, Cusco is the subject or the object of the relative clause. The relative clause is Pacha saved Cusco. So in this case, is the subject or the object? In this case, Cusco is the object of the relative clause because Pacha is the one executing the saving. Pacha is the one that saved, and Cusco is the one that was saved, that received the saving. So Cusco in this case is an object. And so because Cusco is the object of the relative clause, we can just omit that pronoun. So Cusco was a llama who Pacha saved turns into Cusco was a llama Pacha saved. We don't need the who, it's optional. You can use it, who Pacha saved, or you can omit it. Cusco was a llama Pacha saved without the who. And that's it for the class today. See you on the next one.